right, morning everyone. So we've found all the zombies in the conference and we've got them all in one room together. This is good, and you guys are in for a special treat. So I'm going to do the ZombieTime talk first, and this is, JSR 3.10, date and time APIs with some good code examples. This will probably take about 40 to 45 minutes. And then as a double header, I'm also going to do my Confessions of an Agile Methodologist talk. So I did this at Java 1, and it was the one I got the Rockstar Award for. So apparently people liked it. Does that sound good to you guys? Yeah. All right. All right, so I have to get my proper zombie act on. This is a stretch. This is why coders aren't actors. Oh, where's my... Okay, not yet. Human! Who let human in the audience? What's your name, human?
Kay.
Kay? Okay. Should we let Kay stay? Yes. Yes. Kay, you will learn fear of the impending zombie invasion.
So good.
But we let you stay.
Okay, fine.
All right. Kay is our sacrificial human. Thanks for playing along. Oh. And we have a new weapon us zombies are going to use to take over the human population. It's called JSR 3.10. Are you scared, Kay?
I'm scared.
These are our zombie scientists. Anybody recognize these guys? Yeah. Very, very smart zombie scientists. This zombie scientist actually came to my talk in San Francisco. So Roger was really good about giving me good feedback on the presentation. And this zombie scientist complains at me all the time on Twitter, so we're good friends. And what JSR 3.10 is going to do for us is we move really slow, like, zombies, not the fastest creatures on the earth, so we need a fluent API so we can actually be productive. Reading long dates and working with cumbersome APIs is not going to happen. And we don't want to get caught in the middle of our big attack and then have deadlocks in our code. So, thread safety, very important. And to coordinate our global attacks, because zombies are worldwide, we own the world. We need proper time zone handling so we don't have mistakes in our assault. And we're going to try not to repeat this failure with the old date and time APIs. So what's wrong with this? Looks fine, right?
Time zone default to Default wherever the server is.
Okay, well that's a good one, but you're thinking too deep. You're stretching too far. The first number is based on offset of off 1900. So that's in the year 3913. And it gets worse. Yeah, the month. I heard someone say the month. 0 based. The 12 does not exist. Oh wait, it does exist because there's no range checks. So we're actually in 3914, January 25th. And here's our future zombie assault of I think zombies will wear stormtrooper costumes in the future, right? That's like everyone in the future wears stormtrooper costumes. And you know, apparently the presenter put in a picture with escalators, which don't exist. It should have been the elevator, the fancy elevator lifts we have in the air. But we now have a Undead trainer that we're going to use, and I'm going to teach you guys how to use the date and time APIs, so we can effectively prevent huge catastrophic failures with our date and time APIs. How many folks have messed up code with the old date and time APIs? All right, everyone here. Everyone. The rest of you didn't raise your hands. Like, we feel your shame. You don't have to raise your hands. It's really bad. It's really horrible. All right, so we got our Undead trainer. Basic concepts for the date and time API. So I'm going to use this in the code quite a bit. Local date, local time, or local date time. So these are all representations of, you know, just a simple calendar time or date in the current locale. Very useful. Like you'll use these quite a bit in the new APIs. Like the earlier comment about like server time. If you're doing server time and you actually want a precise time since the epoch, you can use instance. So this gets rid of time zone issues since it's universally graded against a single time. And then you have equivalents for these. Periods are spans between two dates, taking account to like, you know, leap years and time zones and all that stuff. And durations are just precise spans where you want to know this many milliseconds between two times. And that pairs well with instance in general. So they actually thought this through quite well. It replaces the old date classes, it replaces the old calendar classes. There's actually no reason you should use the old date and time APIs. And there's even methods to convert from the old date and time APIs into the new ones. Okay, how do you get one? You can do now, and that'll give you, you know, current time. There's a bunch of static helper methods to create dates, and it's highly recommended to use the constants, not use numeric values, although they support both. Also highly recommended. Anyone know when this feature was introduced, the underscores? Yes, 7, very good. JDK 7 introduced the ability to put underscores in numbers. It doesn't actually validate that you put it every 3, but it's a good way when you're writing code to make it more readable for numbers. Highly recommended to do that as well. You can also parse states from strings. And this is actually thread safe for a change, so you don't have to worry about funky thread local, thread, what are those called? Thread, I'm forgetting. Like when you do the simple date time parser, you have to create, yeah, the simple date format, you have to use create a little instance per thread. Otherwise, if you use it across multiple threads, it blows up. Or you have to synchronize on it constantly, which is very unperformant. And then you can also convert. So you can get the old style dates, or you can, yeah, old style dates and go to an instant. And then you can also go from calendars and then go to instance from those as well to get between the old and the new date time APIs. All right, so we're going to show some code. So this is my Pixelated Clock class. And let me show you the application. I'm going to use IntelliJ as my IDE. As you saw in my previous presentation, I also use NetBeans quite a bit. Both good IDEs. And here's our Pixelated Clock class. And this whole code for the zombie application running, it's about 500 lines of code, including the UI. So it's very, very simple stuff, and a good way to practice the date and time APIs. And so there's a few problems with it. OK, well, one we lost, not too good. And two, look at that horrendous. Can any zombies actually spell out that full thing? OK, we're not going to try, because at the speed zombies read, trying to read that entire string would take us the whole presentation. So we're going to see if we can actually improve on that by using a formatter. All right, so there's a bunch of different options for doing formatting of dates. It's kind of like the simple formatters from the old date and time APIs, but they have a nice set of built-ins. So you can do basic ISO date, ISO time, ISO date time, ISO week time. You also have localized formatters, and this is what I'm going to use as an example. These are kind of nice because sometimes you want to keep your code locale friendly. And specifying a specific date time format means that you have to adjust it for each locale you regionalize to. But if you use the localized formatters, then you just specify the approximate length you want. Long, medium, short. And then it does the work of figuring out for that locale what the proper date time format should be to represent it, with the same precision in different locales. And then you can also specify your own funky string, which gives you a lot of control over the date and time, but also means that you're going to have to do your own localization when you port your application. And like I said earlier, immutable, thread safe, all the good stuff you'd want and expect from classes, which you're going to use quite a bit. OK, so here's the code we're going to look at in big form, but I'm going to show you in the IDE. So we're going to use of localized time and then get a short off of it. And that's the JavaFX code, which is going to allow us to update the clock on screen. Not NetBeans. There we go. OK, so right now we're just getting it. But let's see if we can do better than just doing a toString and then use a clock format where the format is going to be short. All right, so a little easier to read. OK, and we still got a problem. We're still losing. Why do we keep losing our game? OK, so the reason is zombies and sun, not so good. That's why we're here in this building. We're not outside, where it's a really nice day. We could be having fun outside in parks, but it's not, because it's daylight and we burn. Actually, I don't even need to be a zombie. I just magically burn. I'm too white. So we're hopefully going to fix this by taking advantage of some of the methods on the date and time class to figure out whether it's day or night and take the appropriate action. OK, so some of the things you can do at date and times, you can compare them, is before, is after, to compare it to different times of day. You can also get the components off of it if you want to get the year, figure out if it's a leap year, figure out the day, as well as all this time info. But what we're going to use is before and is after with very precise calculations on how we should hide from the sunlight. So we'll use a JavaFX Boolean property. This way we can have it be observable from our UI whenever it changes. And then set it night for whether it's after 6 a.m. or before 7 p.m. Or that's daytime. Night would be before 6 or after 7. About right. I mean, if we wanted to get really smart, we could actually check a web service to see the local sunset, sunrise times for our local region, but this will do. All All right, so we got our isNight value, which is already happily set. And let's go to our UI and set up the binding so that when it's daytime, we're going to hide underground. That's what zombies do, right? During the daytime, they dig little holes, hide under the graves, and then we pop out at night and get them. So there, we're safe. Pretty good. So, yeah, this isn't very exciting. We need some villagers to eat. Okay, let's add some villagers in. Villagers, 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 villagers. All right, so now we got some villagers walking around. They look pretty tasty. So now we have a problem. All those happy villagers are out there like stomping around, and we can't eat any of them because it's daytime. So I think we can solve this with time zones. Because somewhere in the world, it must be night right now. All right, so let's learn a little bit about time zones. Okay, don't step on me. All right, so there's a bunch of different time zone utilities as well. So basically, you get a zone ID, and you can pass in a normal time zone string, like any city reference. You can also use 3-letter codes, and these are stored in a map. So you just look up the 3-letter code, and that gets you back a string, which you can then get the zone out of. Although I think, in general, these are recommended to use the city names. And you can also directly get offsets if you know exactly what your offset is that you want. Just don't expect any help with daylight savings time. And zone IDs are used by either doing, you can use a datetime.now in a zone ID, or you can do @zone, or you can actually get your current time in a current zone ID. So basically, most of the methods you can pass in a zone ID and get it for a local zone. All right, so if we took advantage of this, so maybe London will work. What time is it in London now? 4 p.m.? 4 a.m.? 2:50 p.m.? Okay, that's probably not going to cut it. Let's do Asia, yeah. Okay, so let's go back to our clock class. Make it night. That sounds good to me. Well, that would probably work, but let's try Taipei. Asia Taipei, is that real? We'll find out. We'll either get an exception or not. Oh. Okay. What happened? Your friends are hiding from us. How are we going to eat them? All right, well, what do you think? Should we go attack the church? I'm thinking we should just go for it. All right, watch out, Kay. We're going to get your friends. All right, not quite. They outnumbered us, and they threw pitchforks and burnt us. We lose again. Okay, but that shows you how you can change the time zone and then make it night. With the clock as well. There you go. And all the guys ran away and hid in the church. But we can also play with temporal adjusters. And we're gonna use this to get some allies in the fight against the humans. So the way temporal adjusters work is you can basically take any date, do width, and then give it a temporal adjuster. And that will adjust the date for you. And we can also use this with, for unit testing, there's a really convenient way you can specify a clock which you're gauging everything off of. So we'll switch the code over to use one clock which everything is offset off of, set a temporal adjuster on it, and then we can actually have all the dates be adjusted for us. And this is really good for unit testing if you want to write your code, try to catch some corner cases on the date and time logic. You can specify your own clock and then do funky stuff with temporal adjusters and test all these weird logic cases around your code. So we're going to test for Friday the 13th and see if we can actually flip things to pick the next occurrence of Friday the 13th. All right, so here is our Friday the 13th adjuster. So using a lambda expression to create our little temporal adjuster. Now, getting the next Friday the 13th is actually slightly tricky. It's not something that you can easily kind of algorithmically calculate because it's this weird intersection of Gregorian dates and times and a random number you're trying to hit on a specific day of a week. So this logic will just keep incrementing the month and then check and see once we actually hit Friday the 13th. And then we have a special case where if you're in the current month, if you're before the 13th, then you want to check for Friday the 13th in the current month. But if you're after the 13th, you wouldn't want to accidentally return back the current month's Friday the 13th, which could be in the past. So that's why at the beginning, it checks to see if we're before or after the 13th of the month and increments the month once. But fairly straightforward. And you could write custom temporal adjusters for a whole bunch of other things. So I'll show you a second example of a temporal adjuster which does something funky with the dates and times in a sec. Oh, we didn't win yet. All right, let's see. So we'll pull out our Friday the 13th temporal adjuster. Now we're going to use a clock class. And the get clock is going to return Friday the 13th. So now we get the date using a clock. And if you consistently use clocks throughout your code, then you could just use a unit test and inject a new clock and change your business logic to actually use a testable clock. So here we get the new date. All right, so let's give this a try and see how we do it. It might not work on the first try. Okay, so what have we got? Two issues. One, it's not night. Oh, but it did pull, so I guess, what is that? March 2015. So March has a Friday the 13th. So we got one coming right up. This is why I need the date and time APIs, because clearly I'm not good at this. Yeah, okay, so that worked, but it's not night yet. So I think we have to make it night so we can actually eat the humans. Let's go back to the code for a sec. So let's see. If we go to Asia time, I wonder if we'll show up in the day after, the day before night. All right, let's go to our Friday the 13th adjuster. Okay, so we're just getting the current time. And well, I guess we could do a time zone, or we could do an offset. Let's do a time zone. This seems to work. All right, so rather than using the current time, we're going to get the time in Asia and offset that. Maybe. Clock.system default zone. Clock.offset. We need a clock. Okay. We're just going to offset it. Offset duration. Okay. We need a fixed duration. Wrong duration. Thank you. All right, let's try that. Let's see, is 8 hours going to get us tonight? 8 hours might not do it. What time is it now? Whoop-a-doo, Friday the 13th. 6. Oh, 3 minutes off. Okay. We were close. 9. That should put us firmly in night. All right, so they think they've escaped, but we can get some of our friends on Friday the 13th to come out of the tombstone and help us. So our friends, the ghouls, are going to give us a hand. How many ghouls do you think we need to kill off the humans? 1 per person? All right. Just to be safe. Let's see, we got 4 ghouls. Let's get a 5th and then go for the attack. All right. All right. You scared now, Kay? We have successfully killed off the humans leveraging date and time APIs. All right. So I promised you guys I would show you another example of a clock. So I got another fun one here, Multiplier Clock. So what Multiplier Clock does is it speeds up time. So basically this is another clock implementation, but it takes the value you pass in for the clock and then uses that as a base. So it gets the current instant off that as the base. And then as time increments, we're going to make sure that the time gets multiplied by a multiplier factor. So we're actually going to speed up. So like if you're doing like a test suite and you wanted to hit failure scenarios when the clock was running at either backwards or forwards at some weird speed, you could swap this in for your clock implementation in your app. So let's give this one a try. Pixelated clock. Multiplier clock. Let's put it in here. Let's see, and then our multiplication factor. Let's do 100 times normal speed. Let's see what happens. Okay, so it's going pretty fast. So you can see that the animation is sped up, as well as the actual clock time. So seconds are ticking at about 100 times normal speed. And if we made this really fast, we would see the day-night shift. I think to effectively do that, we need to go up 1,000. Is that enough? Maybe let's do 5,000, 6,000. And we should actually see like a day-night shift now. Yeah, so now you can actually see, let's see, that's minutes? Yeah, hours. Okay, so now we're shifting to night. Oh, and apparently, okay, so this is why you test your code with different clocks. Apparently there's a bug where it must be missing the animation frames. So it must, well, I can check the code later, but I think at the speed we've set it, it's going fast enough that it's not actually having time to do the animation frames, so people are not moving anymore, they're all trapped. Wow, that's interesting. Okay. I wonder what the threshold is, because I think I've done it up to 1,000 before. I bet 1,000 works. Yeah, 1,000 works, but somewhere above that, I bet it's when we're hitting the threshold where the timers don't even get fired quickly enough. Okay. So we have successfully won against the humans. And hopefully through this process, you guys have learned a little bit about date and time APIs. So, with all this knowledge, should we let Kay leave the room? No, I don't think so either. We're going to trap her as a prisoner, and we're going to make her watch the Agile methodology talk. Okay, so before I switch to the Agile methodology, did anyone have any questions on the first half about date and time talks? Yeah.
If you're already using Joe's time, What's the conversion effort to get the Java APIs?
Okay, so good question. So if you guys are using JSR, which is highly recommended, like how hard is it to convert the code? So I can't speak from personal experience because I haven't tried to migrate any large code bases, but Steven was the guy writing the spec for JSR, and I think it's, let's see, when I was chatting with him, he seemed to think it was slightly less like featureful. There's some things in JSR which the new date and time API doesn't do. So what I would do is I would try it out first, see how much of the code base you can easily migrate, but you might even want to keep JSR around if you're a big user of it. There's no compelling reason to move over to the date and time APIs other than getting rid of the extra jar file and library you're depending upon and possibly being more compatible with other libraries as they adopt this. Yes?
Is this time API, is that integrated in with JPA?
Okay, yeah, so good question about, question is whether it's integrated with JPA and some of the EE stuff. So it should be. And they're working on new EE, what are we up to now? EE8 stuff, which should be fully compatible with all of this stuff. I think primarily for servers, you want to be using like instance on the back end so that your server time is properly synced up. And it's probably not hard to convert back and forth between the two if you're using JPA, but I don't know what happens if you just use the new dates, whether JPA picks it up today, magically. Okay, so I don't actually know the answer for whether it will magically work, but the new specs should accommodate for that in EE8. And all right, you get the last question. You get the last word before we switch to Agile.
You had two different durations. There was a Java FX duration as well. Are they like subclasses, one subclass of the other, or are they separated?
Yeah, okay, so another really good question. There's a duration in JavaFX, and there's also a duration in the date and time APIs. And I think, unfortunately, as you saw, they're not the same, and they're not subclassed. And I think if they'd done the JavaFX APIs now, they would have used the date and time duration. But since it didn't exist, they kind of had to roll their own. And I think also there's a precision difference. Help me here, Jim. What's the precision on JavaFX durations? Is it?
It's millions of nanoseconds.
Nanoseconds? OK. It might be the same then. I think the new date and time APIs are also accurate to nanoseconds. But anyway, I mean, the answer is they're not the same. OK, so part 2, confessions of a formal Agile methodologist. And the inspiration for this talk is before I joined Oracle, I was actually quite active in the Java community. So I co-authored the JavaFX book with Mr. Weaver. And we were speaking and traveling around and doing things. But my day job was I was a, well, I don't know, Scrum rollout person / Agile methodologist for my company. And I think it's when you're in and doing something, sometimes it's hard to step back and look at it from like a 1,000-foot level. But I can safely step back and look at it from a 1,000-foot level now. So hopefully you guys have a few takeaways. How many folks are doing some sort of Agile methodology at their companies today? OK, so quite a few guys. So I used to just be a, happy coder, doing my thing, oblivious to the world, just wanted to get, my coffee. And I worked in teams where, we'd pretty good, I always had pretty good coworkers and smart people to work with and, got along quite well with my colleagues. But it's a little scary boss. I'm sure over your careers, some of you guys have had bosses which have intimidated you a little bit. Not that they actually intimidate you, but, they're just imposing. But he left. So how long was it? Oh, I think even when he hired me, he told me, he's like, yeah, I'm hiring you, and you know, I'll be gone in a few months. So we were stuck in a situation with no boss, and somehow I got left holding the banana. Anyone been in management in their careers? Okay, quite a number of you. So I'm sure at some point you were left, like you were a technical person, and you're left just like, okay, for the good of the team, I'll do it. I'll take one for the team. And we decided to do extreme programming because, you know, we wanted a lightweight process. We wanted something which let our team actually do work, but at the same time, we needed to convince other folks in the business that we actually were making good progress. We were talking to our customers. We were getting good requirements. So we did pair programming, right? That's one of the tenets of extreme programming is you work together with folks. We did lots of good unit testing. Started working at a sustainable pace. Well, sustainable pace for the Valley is like, you know, 9-10-hour days, but in comparison to the rest of the teams, we were having a relatively leisurely life. And, you know, pretty productive, happy team, knocking stuff out, getting stuff shipped. So, you know, life was good. And then I set out to join the empire. I joined kind of like a bigger, larger corporation. Started working at scale. For me, it was a little bit daunting. You know, you go into a large organization and there's all these extra processes and a lot of group synchronization and things which you're doing. But, you know, again, I had good teams to work with and really smart people. So we got stuff done. But somehow, my boss found out I knew something about this Agile thing, and he wanted me to help out with the bigger picture. This is why you don't tell people about things which you don't want to do. Like if there's some technology or some skill you have that you don't want people to know about, don't put it on your resume or LinkedIn profile. It's a bad idea. All right, so we wanted to convert the whole organization to do like Agile. At this point, I'd done extreme programming, I'd done Scrum, I'd done a little bit of Kanban, like, you know, the whole 9 yards. And we got some elites to help us out. So Ron Jeffries, he's one of the XP founders. He scares management to death because he goes into places and he finds all of the dysfunctions and he just tells them what's wrong. But he's like really smart. Like he'll go in and he'll come up with these crazy ideas and brainstorm on things and be thinking 10 years ahead of his time, which is part of the reason why it's so problematic for him, because he can't like step himself back and actually gauge things. Brian Merrick, who also he's really well known for testing in the testing circles, doing a lot of Ruby right now. But he was more practical. Like he would kind of like go around and he would find a few people who were good co-conspirators, and then he would like show him his latest test framework. Like, you know, back when Fit was just coming out, now Fitness, he actually bounced it off a bunch of us and he got us to like try it out in our unit tests and work on it with QA and get that all working. So, you know, another rock star. And Israel Gatt, he's like the super uber, like, you know, executive process guy. And he was really helpful with trying to explain to our executive management why all of this stuff we were doing mattered. Just a really smart guy, and also his calling is technical debt, which I look at that as like a tool and framework for how you convince your organization to actually spend money on fixing stuff which is broken. So if you have trouble convincing your boss, like, why should we fix this horrible problem which all of us deal with and waste 2 hours a day on? You label it technical debt, you come up with some graphs and charts from, you know, Israel or the Qatar Consortium, and you show that to your boss, and he's like, oh my God, the world is falling. Okay, go fix it. Then you're off and running. Okay, so we created some hyper-performing teams, rolled out new development practices, It did feel kind of like this. And then we let the troops get creative. One of the things we did, which I thought was kind of cool, a lot of companies are doing this now, is we did, what do we call it? Hackathons or hack? We had some cute name for it. But essentially, about after every major release, or at least once a year, we would just clear the slate for a week and let the teams work on something original or new. It's a really good way to surface ideas that all the hackers in the company have about how they can improve the product, which they would never be able to convince the product owner or the business owner to do. It's like, if we only just rewrote this little part of the UI or like tweaked the database or did some like refactoring in the code, which everyone thinks is going to be too long and too involved to actually tackle, then we could get this huge benefit. And so this is a chance, like, you didn't always get the whole solution, but teams actually got really close in most cases after only a week. And then we would show these to executive management and, basically the whole organization. We'd have presentations, like a, afternoon of just lightning presentations on them. And it turns out that like 80% of the projects turned into our roadmap for that quarter. So apparently it was pretty effective because the product management and the executives decided, oh wait, it's that easy to like redo this UI and actually make it not suck? Yeah, okay, you should do that. We'll give you like, 5 weeks, actually productize it. All right, so we had, a few dissenters, but that's to be expected. We know how to handle those guys, right? But overall, it was a pretty big success. On the dissenter front, some of the like, I don't know, Agile consulting groups or people you bring in, they will barrage you with expectations that you're going to lose like 20% of your workforce or some insane number. And my opinion is that's because they suck at doing it. If you do it properly, you don't actually have huge losses of people. Some of the guys who I worked with, who you thought would never be like receptive to practices, they were actually the biggest supporters when we had like a little bit of pushing back to old practices. Because they actually understood why some of the stuff we were doing was broken in ways which, if you hadn't been working on it for 10 years, you just wouldn't get it. So they ended up being the biggest supporters in the end. Okay. We had a huge Agile force taking over the universe, deployed big ships. Actually, the company, some of you guys might have heard of it because it was based out of Atlanta. At one point, we were GXS, which was based in Alpharetta. Before that, no, after that? Yeah, after that it was Innovis, and currently it's Open Text, although I left before it got bought by Open Text. No, all right, so Innovis was the company in Atlanta, and then GXS was when we got by the company in Maryland, and now it's Open Text. Anyway, just in case you're curious. And actually a lot of the development was really global like this. Like 2/3 of the development team, when we got bought by the Maryland company, were in India. They had basically, even though the previous company was mostly like different parts of the US, we had, in addition to the 5 or 8 development centers in the US, we now had like 2/3 of our teams in India after the final acquisition. Lots of meetings, lots of processes. And company-wide invasions. I was probably responsible for this. I was leading all the release planning meetings where we had the entire, everyone in the upper company up in meetings. Quite lots of internal, well, not a lot, but processes tend to surface these sort of things. And it turned out to be a lot of work. I think when we were done, we had somewhere in the order of like 20 Scrum teams. Like the development teams were around 500 or bigger in number. And we had quite a lot of like tooling and process and infrastructure and reports and stuff on our process. It was a lot of work, and I made my escape from the empire. So I am no longer doing this, and I went back to just being a normal guy. So I think hacking well, I can do the process stuff, and it started out just as a simple way to help dysfunctions in my personal team. At some point, the scale reaches large enough where you kind of lose sight of the individuals you're helping. And that's where I figured I needed to get back to my roots and work with Jim on more books. And we're working on a book now. All right, so some of the things which I learned, and hopefully some of this can be helpful to you guys in your teams. So you're all probably familiar with the Agile Manifesto, right? Good stuff, right? Individuals and interactions over process and tools, working software over documentation. Talk to your customers, don't just do contract negotiation and then respond to change. So, you know, that's that. So I got a new one, the Agile Industry Manifesto. And in my opinion, Agile software, like it went out from being this grassroots, like we're just going to do what makes our teams effective and what works, into this overarching, we're going to make money on you. And we're going to create industries around this. And it has helped to support wider rollouts, but at the same time, you get the expert advice, you get like methodologies popping up left and right, lots of metrics and tooling licenses, and it's, all right, let's focus on the first one, expert advice. So you know these guys? Yeah. So it's kind of funny because, you know, I still keep in touch with Ron and hang out with him occasionally. I meet a bunch of these guys at conferences. For a while, I was doing the Agile speaking circuit as well, while I was doing the Agile methodology gig. And it turns out that, like, after about, I don't know how many years ago the Agile Manifesto, it must be about 20 years now for the Agile Manifesto. It's been pretty long. But like these guys, they finally figured out they're really bad business people. Like they're really good technologists, but like as far as like expert consultants, there's only a few of these guys who have been really, really successful. Oh, he's like really smart. Alistair is like, I met him in person. He just blew my mind away, like his thinking and. But like, yeah, a few of these guys have made a lot of money, like, you know, Kent and the Scrum guys, and well, I guess Jim's doing pretty good. So they've really made like careers and ways of monetizing on it. But in general, what they're really good at is like the teams and the coding and the technology. And like, you know, what I see a lot of these guys doing when I'm at conferences is they're actually like, who was it? I think it was, Ward's the wiki guy, right? Yeah, so he was showing me his latest little like new wiki effort he's trying to build out. And it's just him hacking and coding and doing what he does best. So you can learn a lot from these guys, but at the same time, don't assume that they can solve your problem. And there's also no shortage of books written on the subject, which is in its way kind of its own dysfunction. But none of that stuff, the experts or the books, are a substitute for actual experience on projects and adapting it to what you want to do. So here are some of the symptoms that something's gone wrong. So you're in a meeting, somebody says, according to blah, 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 in this book that I just read last night, no. Like if they can't actually like relate it to what you're working on the project, they're just using it as a wedge to somehow get like their opinion right, make their opinion right. And you know, you want to have the discussion about what actually matters for your teams, not citing a book reference. And then, you know, same thing for experts. You know, you probably had discussions about sprint lengths. And retrospectives. If you keep seeing the same things in retrospectives week after week, that's probably a sign that you're not actually doing process improvement, which is the only way that you actually like make processes work. If your idea is you just stamp out a process from a book or an expert and you follow that forward, then you're going to fail because it doesn't get better, it just digresses over time. Okay, and then my confessions. So let's see. Okay, so I'm a sucker for Ron and some of these guys. Like when I get in a room with them, same thing with Alistair, I get in a room with them, whatever they say is right. I can't think. Like I just bow down to them. I'm like, oh my God, that was brilliant. Let's see. The guy who forced your sprint lengths to line up. Oh yeah, I did that. I think, well, this was actually a Dean Leffingwell recommendation. And it probably makes sense when you're coming into a company with 100 Scrum teams and you need to like institute a uniform process. You need to make sure things work. Yeah, but I mean, for the teams, when you start taking away freedoms like this, then it actually impacts their ability to refactor their process. And retrospectives. I'm not very, well, I don't like them. I know they're really important, but I'd rather be coding than sitting in a meeting talking. But if you're not doing these, then you can't improve your process. So, okay, number 2, methodologies over craftsmanship. So there's a lot of software methodologies. You can basically pick your methodology. So who's doing extreme programming? Okay. Very good. You're doing. We should do extreme programming in our book. Very good. Yeah. Scrum? Okay. A few Scrummers. Are you certified? Okay, I'm going to get to that. Kanban? All right. Scrum and Kanban. This is what it feels like to me when you're on Kanban. You don't get a moment to breathe. You're so busy picking up and like knocking stuff out. It's really productive, but it's also, it's hard to think. All right, and then you can do this Kanban while pair programming. Anyone try this?
At a standing desk.
Standing desk with a treadmill? Yeah, actually, I started using a standing desk at home now. But I don't use it all the time. It goes up and down, so I can like raise it up and sit down when I want to. But you know, I'm getting old. All right, sorry, Jim. I can't complain. I can't complain. All right, so what makes projects fail? Build server. Yeah, that's under his desk. So you're laughing. Our team's in India. When I wanted to build the shit, they're like, no, the jars are on this guy's machine, and you know you have to run it through this or it doesn't work. I'm like, well, how do you guys develop software? How do you just email him their changes? Okay. We have unit tests. They're just manually run and manually verified. Right? Right? I had people who would, with a straight face in a meeting, they would tell me, yes, we have unit tests. And I would check the code base. And there would be checked in main methods with no assertions. Okay. Anyway, software quality. That's what the guys over there do. Throw it over the wall. Very common. Anti-pattern. Okay, and some of my confessions. I occasionally check in binaries. So I'm guilty of not using a repository manager all the time. But it's better than not having them at all or having them on Johnny's machine only. I train teams on Scrum. When I later found out, like 3 months in, I should have been training them on JUnit. They were so excited to learn Agile, I didn't actually stop to think like, wait, do you guys actually write unit tests and check your code into version control and do all the basic development practices? I somehow missed that. And all my Agile talks have been on methodologies or anti-methodologies, not on actual tooling. Wait, actually that's not, did I ever do a talk on my JFXtras test framework? I might have done it as part of a talk. I wrote a behavior-driven development test framework for JavaFX. I can't remember if I did a talk on it though. Okay, number 3, metrics over clean code. So metrics are things where you think you're just coding along happily, right? These guys look pretty happy in their little posh open air coding environment, but nope, somebody's watching over you. And most large companies, like one of the mandates or one of the value props of an Agile methodology is it actually gives them more traceability and like transparency of the process than any other form of practice. I mean, you know, the old style of having a project manager like come to everyone's desks and check up on their tasks for a Gantt chart, that actually gave you zero transparency because it was always wrong. Having the developers enter their tasks daily into like a Agile tooling like Rally or something, you know, the executive can just push a button and then get a chart out and know exactly what everyone's working. So you're a metric junkie when you log into your Agile tooling on vacation to make sure you have a pretty burn down chart. Has anyone done this? I have done this too. Okay, keep up with other high-performing teams. You inflate your estimates by a factor of 10. Then 100, then 1,000. This is the secret. You ever see the high-performing talks, high-performing teams? They never actually baseline their velocity. They talk about how high-performing they are, and you ask them, well, how do you actually make sure you don't have velocity creep? And there's not an answer. Your QA team won't accept the build when the code coverage drops below 98%. If they're relying on code coverage as the only metric for what they look at, then there's a problem. Okay, and my confessions. Some weeks I spend more time, well, I used to spend more time in Excel than my IDE. This is an anti-pattern. But if you've ever been a Scrum Master, you probably know what I'm talking about. Like, before Agile tooling was real, you spent a lot of time doing stupid Excel burn down charts. Code coverage. I got that. 0 assertions. Call method, call method, call method, call method, call method. And I've killed projects with pie charts. Very easy to do. Show the wrong pie chart to the wrong executive. They read it, interpret it their own way, and they decide we don't need something. So yeah, you have to be careful how metrics are used. It's very, very easy to misuse metrics in ways which are detrimental to the industry. Okay, and last one, tooling licenses over in-person collaboration. And there's a whole bunch of different tools that you can invest in the Agile industry to do different things. These are just a few, you know. Rally, I think this one is Fisheye. This one is actually my own tooling. I built some Agile tooling. Jim actually took it over after I finished it. It was called Apropos, and now Rally Portfolio something. I forget. Portfolio Planner. And remote teams. Anyone working on a distributed team? Yes. Okay. Have you visited your remote teams ever? Yeah. So that, I would consider that the worst failure in our industry is that we have all the tools at our disposal to communicate over email, occasional video conferencing. There's a bunch of different ways you can interact remotely with your team, but because of that, you never actually physically meet the folks you're working with. And so in my experience, even just a single in-person meeting before you start a new project or before you kick off a new team has a huge effect on the work ethic, of like the ability of the team members to collaborate and be effective together. So what I would try to do is always get one in-person meeting with new teams which are formed, but you know, it costs money. And they're like, well, we don't have money for that. We used our travel budget for the year sending people to Devnexus, for example. But probably they didn't do that. Probably they actually cut on that too, is my guess. All right, so you know you've overdone the tooling when the QA guy wants you to fix the coffee. All right, sorry, I'm losing it. Okay, so before you can fix the coffee machine, he wants you to file a bug first. So I've run into lots of QA groups where basically they won't even talk to you. They won't even have a conversation before it's entered into a tool. And that itself is a problem. The only person who writes stories in your planning meeting is the Scrum Master, because he's sitting in front of the computer and typing it into the online tool as you're doing the meeting. And that's a really bad anti-pattern as well, which I'm guilty of. You go into shock when for the first time you realize you're the only guy on the team because you've never actually seen any of your team members. Probably not quite this extreme, but the first time I came out to like Alpharetta to meet my team out here, it wasn't like as much shock as just like this mental reset where you have this image of them, and suddenly you're like, oh, Bob, how do you do? Because you're like, you know them really well, but then the first time you look at them, you're just confused. You're like, who's Bob? Oh, that guy on my team I talk to every morning. So in-person meetings rock. Do at least once. And my confessions. So I was one of the Scrum Masters who entered all the stories in my team. I'm guilty of that, although we moved away from it eventually. I also put in all the estimates for my team members for efficiency. Another really great anti-pattern. I was really good at this though. Everyone would hold up the cards and do the estimates, and before they could even figure out which one would won, I'd already had it typed. And I built my own tooling and unleashed it on unwitting teams. So I just complained about tooling vendors, and then I actually not only created tooling, but I aided and abetted Rally with some of their portfolio management tooling, which they use. So I think in conclusion, the summary is you should stick to what you're best at. And for me, hacking, beer, video, doing the interviews outside. So, find your strengths and roll with them. And hopefully you guys learned a little bit from this presentation that you can take back and improve your work culture. All right, so thank you very much for attending the double-header JSR 310 and Agile Confessions of an Agile Methodology presentation. And enjoy the rest of the conference and lunch.